So I get an email yesterday as I'm getting ready for maintenance matters, going. I wonder what Kevin Lindsey, the guy who's in charge of all the technology, not the technology like on the computer, but the technology under your hood at Travel Centers of America, on another edition of Maintenance Matters, and he says, "What do you think about icy roads?" I don't like them, Kevin. I don't like them. He meant let's talk about them. Let's talk about ways that we can mitigate the circumstances on which we drive them. How about not doing it at all? But stuff happens, and we thought we'd take a run at it. Although we should do the speed limit. Good morning, Kevin. How you doing? And how is the world in your warm pocket?
Well, the warm pocket was Sunday actually. Instead of getting all that ice accumulation, I actually woke up Sunday morning here with 45 degrees and rain, and it melted everything that it fell on Saturday and Saturday night. So we got lucky in the little spot where we're at now. 20 miles up the road, it's solid ice.
I got to tell you, Kevin, we got really lucky because my mom and dad and my whole family live in an area of New Orleans called Lakeview, so you can imagine what we have a view of.
Hmm.
And the big worry was anybody that's been in New Orleans cold will tell you that people will tell you there's nothing like a 20 degree day in New Orleans because of the moisture and the wind that are necessary to produce
Hmm.
that. We got really, really lucky in that immediately after the rain arrived, the wind did too. And so rather than raining and being windy, it rained, it snowed a little bit, and then it began to blow like crazy. And so by the time morning rolled around, we didn't have any frozen roads because it all got blown away.
Yeah,
All the moisture got blown away. So we got
yeah.
very, very lucky. So you got your warm spot. It
Well,
ain't warm. It ain't
it's
warm
not
anymore.
warm
No,
now.
I'm gonna say
No,
it ain't
no,
warm
no.
now. What are you looking at now? What are you feeling?
It was 9 degrees this morning, so that's not too bad.
Yeah,
That's not too bad. So,
speaking of
uh,
Lindsay's, our good friend Lindsay Lawler is, yeah, I mean, her house is a mess. Trees hit it, a whole bunch of power stuff got knocked out. It's a mess over there. So we're all rooting for you and thinking about you. And people shouldn't be driving in this, should they?
no, no, no. You really shouldn't unless you have. I mean, especially for truck drivers, there's some necessities out there. I mean, because there's people needing
Yeah.
things, and not everyone prepares for storms and things like what we're seeing now, right? So there's some people that still need things out there.
Yeah, and there are
So
people who need things who actually really need them. I mean, there are
yeah,
medications and and
yes,
water and stuff like
absolutely.
that is all really important, which is where our friends come in doing their jobs. Um,
Well, and what I really wanted to talk about was just typical, typical winter weather. Not this something like we just saw. This is one of those once a year or maybe once every 2 or 3 years of anomalies that just kind of takes over the whole country for a little bit. So
yeah,
it's a little different, but I just kind of wanted to talk in general. When we're looking at going through, from certain conditions, like, maybe you were running I-10, along the coast, from New Orleans to Tallahassee or somewhere, picked up a load, and you got to head north now. So things like that to look for before you start hitting those patches of bad roads that are out there, that could be out there.
yeah,
So,
and the other thing is too, if I understand what we kind of touched on before we kind of came in here, is that we're talking about really a specific kind of pre-trip, a specific kind of once over, a last kind of. I hate to say this. There are tires we should drive on just fine on a regular day. There are tires you might want to think twice about before hitting an icy road. To chain or not to chain is always the question. Everybody always tells you, unless it is a medical emergency, if you got a chain, then you ain't got to drive. Is kind of an ongoing thing, but sometimes you do have to chain. But there are things that you should look at. I'm gonna let you kind of unpack this for people. So we're in Florida with Jody, Florida man. We're headed up to Michigan. That's his route, by the way. He does a lot of things. He goes back and forth between Jacksonville and a lot of the Michigan area. So let's talk about how one goes about doing that. Where would you like to start?
well, so, really, let's start at the front of the truck with steer tires. I mean, there's always lots of talk about how to getting the truck going. We've been talking about getting getting the truck cranked for a month now, right, in cold weather, you know. But once you do get going, you always want to stop, you know. And we always talk a lot about brakes, you know, and everything else. But I do think sometimes one of the things we may miss on a little bit in these segments are the importance of, you know, of steer tires, not just steer tires, but drive tires, tires in the colder weather, you know, and why it's so important that you want that traction, you know, on the rear of that tractor, you know, on the rear of the truck, more than on the front of the truck. You know, I've heard a lot of guys over the years, drivers, say, "Hey, we got bad weather coming. I need a new set of steer tires." What, all right, what about your drive tires? Oh, you know, I got 4/32. I'm okay. Is it? It's, you know, it's you know, but that's
You know, here's the great part about you, though, Kevin. This is the best part about you is that usually when you talk, most people talk to a truck driver, even people who know a little bit about something, they kind of go, "Look, I'm the expert here." You're the one person that can look these people in the eye and go, "You know, I don't want to question your expertise, but if anybody's going to question your expertise, other than the OEM, you know, other than the OEM, maybe I'm the guy." And I'm not trying to sell you anything. I'm just trying to make sure you don't die here. Crazy idea I've
yeah,
got. I'm
right,
just a
right,
crazy
yeah.
kind of
You
guy
know,
here.
be safe out there. You never know when I may come around you out there on that road.
I
So,
am. Yeah. By the way, yeah. I mean, you have no idea when Phone Master Ray and I are out there driving. Listen, I'm going to ask a question I really don't know the answer to. I'm not setting myself up for this.
yeah.
So we've talked about the idea of letting letting the truck breathe essentially when you turn it on, when you first
Hmm.
kind of get it going, not to just kind of, literally, I had Paranormal Pie Man writing me being like, yeah. So I reposted us talking about starting your car in the winter, and he's like, yeah, just throttle that thing up. He was being sarcastic, but.
Yeah.
But are there things that you should do in regards to checking your tires, other than the obvious stuff, before you actually hit roads that might be a little bit slick, a little bit hard to kind of
Well,
maneuver?
yeah, you know, it's just as important or even more important, you know, because, you know, as colder temperatures come, yeah, your tire pressures are going to lower, obviously, right? So, but one thing you really want to make sure of, especially on on the rear, on the drive axles, or anywhere there's a dual set of tires, you want to make sure that both of those tires are relatively even in pressure. And the reason I say that is because the one that has, I mean, depending on the load that you put on those tires, you know, how much weight you put on them and how much they're squatting, you know, when you have unequal pressure on a set of duals, one of them's carrying more load than the other, which when we start talking about icy roads and stuff, now you're talking about a single tire, which is a lot less circumference with grip to the road, right? Than if you have both of them evenly and they're you know, the pressures are fairly even, therefore they're making a twice the size footprint in the snow or the
Right.
ice or whatever. Does that, if that makes sense, you
No,
know
it
what
makes
I'm trying to
perfect
say
sense.
here.
And the Paranormal Pie Man, by the way, just wrote, "Dang it, I didn't get to full rev the rig up on startup today." Now, shut up, Paranormal Pie
Oh,
Man. Joe
yeah.
J says
Hey,
good morning as well. Go ahead, Kevin.
well, you know, you start it up, you know, mash that throttle down. There are people out there that will gladly take your money to fix some things for you if you want some.
As a matter of fact, Paranormal Pie Man, next time you get a chance to fully rev it up, I'll give you Kevin's number and you can have him on speed dial, dude. You can just be like, Kevin, yeah, I revved it up. I'm sorry.
Yeah, well,
Okay,
you know,
so we want to make sure those steer tires, we'll make sure the drive tires, it's not, you got, it's really a matter of, because what you're really looking for here is an even impression. We
yes,
talked
yes.
about it's like not there's natural harmonics, but there's also balancing the equipment too. The idea that you want it to kind of sit, it's almost imagining it
Yeah.
kind of sitting perfectly level and as much
Well,
level as you can get, right?
absolutely, absolutely, and a couple things to keep in mind. You know, I've heard people talk about, you know, the steer tires. They want the traction so they can turn, but, you know, quite honestly, when you get on ice, your steer axle on a big truck is the lightest axle there is
Yeah.
with a single tire footprint.
Hmm.
It don't matter what kind of traction you got, it's not going to turn exactly how you think it will or can, and you're not going to be able to control that as good, you know. So you know, if you stop, if you stop and think about that before you ever start and realize, hey, I really got to watch that, that because think about that. You got 8 tires on the back of that tractor. And if you've got your trailer connected, you got some weight on those. So that's really where your stability's at, for, for traction and everything. So if you can keep those 8 tires going in a straight line and not get turned a little sideways and skid or anything, because once they start, there's a good chance that those 2 steer tires are not going to bring it out of it, get enough traction to bring you out of that. So, and it's funny. I've seen some of these videos, over the weekend of trucks and stuff, and I'll be honest with you, there's so many fake ones out there that's done with AI. It looks like, because I'm like, there's no way that really happened. That's some of these things are crazy, but it's amazing how far this stuff's come.
Oh my God, it
But
is. It's terrifying, as a matter of fact. And the thing is too is that there's got to be. I think the next piece of technology that's going to come out in regards to all of this stuff is some kind of device that people can. I don't know how to
say,
put this. Where
say, is this real? Is it not? Is it live or
yeah,
is it
that
Memorex?
literally lets you know. There's got to be somebody is going to try to figure out something that basically says, yeah, not like can you spot the clues? It's going to be like, nope, this thing is where somebody's. But the thing is, how do you do it though? Because the only way to spot AI in regards to like the kind of stuff we're talking about is to have an AI program that spots AI. And do you know if it's telling you the truth? But there's so much stuff out there that is utter and complete nonsense. I wanted to ask a
Oh
really
yeah,
quick question. I don't know the answer to. It's the only kind of
yeah.
questions I ask of you, which is, does the lightness of the axle make it freeze faster, or what kind of issues do you have if you don't warm your car up with the axles in regards to really cold weather? Is that possible? Could you miss something? And like I said, don't know the answer here, Kevin. You could just say, no, that won't
Well,
happen.
what do you mean by freeze? You talking about like the freezing to the road or wherever you're parked or things like
Yeah,
that?
well, I'm talking about like the idea that it's like how, and like I said, once you run your truck long enough from a certain stationary point, any kind of freezing that's happening on there, the truck's going to heat up
Yeah,
and
yes.
prevent that from happening. But is there any way that any kind of the freezing that you see before you really get rolling can have any sort of impact in regards to something doesn't take a short time to thaw? I don't see that being the case, but I wanted to kind of ask that question to make sure
I
too.
mean, no, I don't think so. Not really. I mean, it's really going to depend, because I have seen situations myself, in certain weather conditions where, I go out, especially with when you have the freezing rain and sleet and stuff, you know, things can puddle up depending on where you parked, so yeah, a lot of times, that stuff freezes around those tires. You may have traction at the bottom of that, but once you start trying to turn, it's nothing but solid ice. And what's bad is when it's really, really cold outside. If it spins some, yeah, that's going to generate some heat locally. That's probably going to melt some of the ice, but now it's going to turn it back to water, which water. We always seem to be amazed at how water can find its way into places. But, and I've said this on the show before, molecularly, it's the smallest substance we deal with. I mean, it's H2O, and it can get in a lot of places. It's pretty small,
Yeah, and
for
yeah.
from a structure standpoint.
Well,
So,
that's a really
so
good
once,
point too. Yeah, I mean, you got to let. That's another reason to let it sit because as little you want to avoid pulling any more water into your truck than absolutely is
oh,
necessary. That's what we're
absolutely,
talking
right?
about. Okay, all right, that makes a
Yeah,
lot of sense. By the way,
yeah,
the paranormal pie man makes jokes. He does know what he's talking about. Makes a really good point. As long as your tire hasn't turned into rocks in the cold, because that's the other
it,
thing too. You got to check for that
mm,
too to make sure that your tires haven't turned to rocks.
yes,
Just let it
and
sit. Let it sit. Just move it a little bit, just break that ice up, right?
yeah, just a little bit at a time. Easy, easy on that throttle. Easy on that throttle when you go to move that first time, and very even possibly move just a little bit and wait a little bit again. And yeah, I mean it depends on the situation, obviously, but um, you know something to keep in mind, before all this stuff happens is, a lot of major fleets out there nowadays, with drive tires and stuff, once they get down to like 6/32, they want them changed out. If they're doing a, a preventative maintenance inspection, or just, a periodic mid-trip inspection, something like that, when they see tires get down to 6/32, they're like, yeah, we need those. I need new tires, or yeah, a new tire for that position, because it's worn down. And that's one of those things too, I think, that gets overlooked, is looking at those duals, those dual sets of tires, making sure they're within me personally, I always like to see them within 2 or 3 or 4 30 seconds. I think a lot of people say, well, as long as they're within 6/30, or even 8/30, which, when you stop thinking about that, that's a quarter of an inch, right? 8/30. So I mean, because we kind of deal with tread depth on tires in 30 seconds of an inch. And I don't know why, but it's the way it's always been done. So I guess that's why we do that. But
Well, I won't lie to you either, Kevin. Anytime anybody says as long as theirs, I always get a little bit nervous. Well, as long as theirs, yeah. How about we don't get to that point?
yeah,
That's a
yeah.
kind of a good thing to think about too. Just sort of jokey fashion, our good friend Chowder says, "Good morning, all from chilly Iowa without beans." And Dave, if you got a little dog, I suggest a Nathan's with ketchup and relish. Yeah, full send is with the paranormal pie. I'd like a hot dog right now. I'll wait until noon though. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about some stuff in regards to that you might not expect when you. So you get the, you don't throttle the thing up. Paranormal pie man's expertise notwithstanding, you don't throttle the thing up. You do it a little bit easier. You coax it in. You make sure that any kind of ice at the top of your tires is fully gone. Because I didn't even think about that. You literally have ice all inside of every part of your tire, and it starts to roll. It could slip you. I mean,
It could. It
it
could.
could slip you, and why take the chance? Let it all get worked out. Okay, what next?
Well, this is going to sound a little funny, but if you stop and think about it, let's say you're in Pensacola, Florida, down on I-10 or something. It's 75, 80 degrees. It's this time of year. It's nice down there. Well, you had a low tire. You've aired it up. Well, think about where you got that air. It's probably very humid air. And now you're up in Iowa. It's minus 10 this morning, or whatever. And that moisture in that air that was in that tire could also be frozen inside that tire. So, it can create frost inside that tire. And I think that goes back to something you mentioned there,
Rocks.
don't let those, yes, don't let those tires become rocks, due to that. Right. So,
Let me ask you a
so
question though. This is a serious one. So let's just talk about the idea of rocks. So of course, you get rolling long enough, of course, and you know, a moving truck is in and of itself heat. That's what it is. No truck rolls and creates cold. It just
nope.
That's not the reality of it. Even if it does create cold, it's creating cold that is actually generated by heat coming through your vents. Change your filters, by the way, guys.
Yeah.
All
Had to
of
get it in.
You had to get it in. All of that said, though, let's kind of talk for a moment about what that could look like in regards to what's happening to you as you drive, though. If there are pockets of freeze inside of your truck, inside of your tire.
Well, if that moisture has settled and then frozen, so now you end up with uh, basically chunks of ice inside that tire, which is going to throw some balance off, until it's heated up. But you got to remember, once that tire gets rolling down the road, especially if you've got a load, that weight on it and that friction from that tire surface on the road, even on ice, with a layer of ice, is still going to generate some heat into that tire, which is hopefully going to melt that out. So, which is ultimately going to raise that temperature of the rubber part of the tire, which is now going to help it be more flexible, which can get more traction. But like whoever it was there was saying, if it turns to a rock, you know, think about that. The harder it is, probably the less traction you're going to get on something else that's hard. You take two hard surfaces and try to try to roll them over each other and get grip on one and make the other turn or make one move. It's a lot harder than when the compounds that are meeting, one's softer, one's harder. It's
Well,
you're going to get more traction like that,
Well, the
right?
other
So
thing I always think of too is that I forget who told me this one time. They said basically what a truck is a piece of very very dangerous equipment that basically is stabilized by a whole like 18 pockets of air. 18
yes,
pockets of air that are encased in rubber, and if that rubber is rock solid, it means there's no give to it, and of course the road needs give. I mean that's
yes,
what tires are designed for. The tires are actually designed to give. It's why we'll use the summer example. It's why you shouldn't overfill your tires. And a lot of people
yeah,
don't understand that. The idea that oh, I topped them off. No, 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 don't do that. You want to have some give. You want to have a certain. It doesn't seem soft because it's a tire, but there are hard tires and there are softer versions of hard tires, and you want to
yeah.
have it. You want to have that tire as soft as possible given the conditions. Am I making sense? Is that right?
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense, and and too much air pressure in one for cold temperatures, because if it's 5 degrees outside and you're airing a tire up to 100 psi, what kind of pressure is going to be inside that tire when that temperature increases? They say, oh, I forget now what it is, but every so many psi is, or so many degrees of temperature, and it's a one of those varying scales, but dependent. But as that tire gets hotter, as you put heat into that tire, it also increases the air pressure. So,
The other
which
thing.
is odd, right? When you
Well,
really stop and think about it, but
Well,
it
it's
is.
interesting too because being a kid on a bicycle actually has an analogy that works for this. I mean, in terms of the most simplistic way, though, think about when you were a kid. It's like you have these people who had like tires just jacked up, and the
Yeah.
way a bump feels when when
Hmm.
you're going over city streets on a bicycle, just sit on a bike and hit a bump with your tires overinflated. Watch how it
Oh yeah.
feels compared to how it feels when your tires are where they should be.
Hurt your
It
butt a little bit, right?
hurts your butt a little bit, yeah. A little bit.
little bit.
Little
Yeah.
goose in the caboose is going on there. What ends up happening, but that's the truth of the matter.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
kind of it. And I mean, look, there's so much else to talk about here in regards to that about what you're looking at because it isn't like look if you go walk out and look at your truck and one side is leaning in the wrong direction. Okay, well something, but it's kind of different than that. And I was going to ask you in regards to you roll in the snow a little bit, stop the truck, get out, and then take a look to see what the traction looks like with the what you're leaving in
Oh,
your wake.
yeah. I would. That's one of those things. I and maybe it was just I don't know, some common sense country boy stuff I learned at a fairly young age. Well, in inclement weather, I would always do that, kind of look and see, how far down am I sinking? Am I going all the way down? Oh, look, no, all I'm doing is compressing the snow. And with the temperatures and the way my tire treads are and the way it's doing nothing but creating a sheet of ice that I'm making that I'm going, I probably shouldn't be driving on this. but, I mean, I agree with that. It's not a bad idea. You pull forward, a few feet, maybe a few yards, whatever, and take a look at that traction. What is it looking like? Because with just that friction from it rolling across it, depending on temperature, it can actually, melt some of that stuff and even get all the way down to the asphalt, to the road to get better traction. And sometimes it does, right? So just dependent. So
By the way, last question because we're running out of time here too.
oh,
Are there I know unbelievable, huh? I'm telling you, dude, these things fly. I wanted to ask you this. So not Joe J, Paranormal Pie Man once again says snow tire versus summer tire. There are situations where maybe you might want to think about changing your tires. Is that
absolutely. And I think our friends up in the Great White North, they got laws for some of that stuff, right? When it
yeah?
gets to be a certain time of year, you've got to have certain tires not just on commercial vehicles, but even on automobiles, right? So
Let me tell you something. If I
that's
ever get, Jim Park and Joanne Ritchie of OBAC, they show up here about, once a month to talk about, well, twice a month now to talk about, Canada calling. And what's really funny about it is the fact that I am now dreading because I'm going to ask Jim that question and I am going to get a treatise. He is going to give me a treatise on swapping out tires because he'll know that rule inside and out. Good morning to Marty Ellis, who's over at the Speedway in Faven. Good morning to our good friend Chowder, who is over in the Dakotas. And Joe J says, speaking of ketchup and relish, does anybody remember Heinz hamburger relish from the 80s? It was a ketchup-based relish. I remember it. He still mourns the discontinuation of it.
well,
Maybe Travel Centers of America can bring that back, a little ketchup relish. Can you talk to
I
them about it? Come on.
I tell you what, I'll see what I can do.
You got that kind
I'll
of
see
pull,
what I
man. You
can.
got keeping people safe. Keeping people
I don't
safe.
know about that, but I'll see what I can do.
Kevin, can't thank you enough for making the time. Please stay safe in that balmy 5 degrees that's out there right now.
Oh
Just
yeah,
be careful, be safe. We're rooting for you. We're cold down here, but we're more than managing. It's certainly better than your conditions. Get out of here. Go have a great day, my friend.
All right, you guys too.
Take care,
Kevin
Kevin.
Lindsey appears every week on Tuesday, 7:30 in the center, 8:30 in the east, here on Maintenance Matters. It's brought to you by Travel Centers of America. We're going to come back on the other side. Phone lines are open.